Welcome to the Washdown podcast, episode 103. And today we have returning guest Adam James. Adam was a firefighter and is now a chaplain, and he is here to talk to us today about that and some stuff that he's got going on, and also what grief looks like with firefighters and first responders, because it's a little bit different than everybody else. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Hope you learn a lot. I'm going to leave his contact information in the video description. So like, subscribe. If you're struggling, he is a resource. So reach out to him. All right. So here you go. Episode 103 with Adam James.
That's good. That's good. No, that's good. Yeah. I get
it. No, it's, and I talked about that. I talked about that a lot of, we will sit here and we'll record a podcast.
Yeah.
And then sit here and just talk for 20, 30 minutes afterwards.
Exactly.
And that's the stuff that we should, there's so much gold after we turn the camera off.
But it's because we're naming names of all of our friends and confidants and people that we know, and we can't put them out there like that. So,
no. And even we're touching on topics that, maybe should not be
brought to light.
Well, not necessarily brought to light, but maybe in a more tactful way than we talk about it.
Absolutely. And I should introduce myself as, you know me, I'm Adam James. I was a Kansas City firefighter. I am now a deacon in the Episcopal Church. And a lot of people ask me first thing, what's a deacon? And I explained to people, I said, a deacon is somebody who gathers those that are scattered in the world. We work primarily outside of the church. We work with people that are struggling with not only their faith, but a sense of what their spirituality looks like. And regardless of whether or not you have a formal religion that you believe in, you have a formal connection to a church, you have a sense of spirituality. Everything has a soul, not just a human. And what we're here to do is to affirm that your beliefs are what matters. Because in order for you to maintain your physical and mental wellness, you need somebody to help you be reminded of what makes you well spiritually. And that conversation looks different. You see it a lot in the hospitals. And last time I was here, I talked about what it was like in the hospitals. Yeah. Because the hospital systems, the healthcare systems understand that not only do their employees, but the patients need somebody to come along as a confidant to allow them to be trusted and to share what's on their mind. The idea of getting off of your heart those issues that really dig at you deep, those issues that are life and death related, that are related to severe pain that's deep inside. We're trained in the sense to understand what that sounds like and looks like, even when it's not something that you're going to be able to understand. We understand the idea of pain on a soul level. And what we can do is be that launching pad to get you to the right people that can help you walk through the process of finding happiness and health. We can do a little bit of that, but there are great therapists, there are great psychiatrists out there that can do the work of walking with you through the details of how did you get to this point, and what did it take for you to get to this point of pain. And as a former first responder and firefighter, what we see that is painful doesn't show itself in our physical and our verbal expressions like it does in the civilian community. We show pain in a different way. I am fully guilty of showing it in hunger. When it comes to food, I was a firehouse cook. Cooking was absolutely my love. Probably my first love. Firefighting was my second love. Cooking for a crowd was more important, and it makes sense. A deacon in the church sets the table for the priest to celebrate over. So the idea of preparing a meal is something that is deeply ingrained in me, and I see that brings people together. In the firehouse, that's exactly what we need. We need to eat a meal together. It's the great equalizer. It allows everybody to be who they need to be. But
there's there's no rank in the cook shack.
They say that, and that is valuable. And even in the church, there's no rank in that sense. A priest and a deacon are the same thing. A pastor is a term that is used for both. And we are there to provide the meal. And a priest sanctifies that meal and provides that experience of of God coming close to us and being in us. And we can take that in us in the form of communion. We can receive God in ways in our lives that is very close, like baptism, confirmation. There's many other ways. Healing of the sick. And those moments are few moments that we have in our lives when we are exposed to the divine in a sense that it is right in our face. And I say that because as we're talking right now, one of our little dogs, our little 10-pound dogs, is undergoing surgery right now at Eagle Creek because she has a tumor that's cancerous. And the phone call we got this morning was joyful because it was benign and not malignant. The idea that we'll be able to get this fixed and she'll be able to continue to live her life absolutely fills me with joy today because we've lost a couple dogs to cancer, and it's awful.
Yeah, that's we lost one about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Same thing, and it just came out of nowhere.
They do that.
And yeah, that's not to get on the whole dog topic, but if you're a dog person, then they're a member of your family.
There are four-legged children that never grow up to resent us, as my dad says.
Exactly. And unfortunately, they're not going to take care of you whenever you retire either. But
they're not. And I have to tell you, I've witnessed the beauty of what a spiritually healthy process can be to find a community of like-minded people that are elderly, that move into a community where there's free living and then eventually assisted living and then fully cared for living. And the idea of thinking about the future is something we don't do as firefighters.
Oh, not that far down the road.
No, because we just hope that we'll fall over from a big fat heart attack at 80 after living a great life.
Yeah.
Most of us don't do that. We degenerate in a nursing care facility without any help.
Yeah. Well, and especially whenever you take into account the things that we do to our bodies. I mean,
yes,
just the on-the-job things, the wear and tear on your ankles, your knees, your back, your shoulders, your neck. I mean, you're not setting yourself up for success later in life by doing this job. It's going to break you down physically.
Yeah, I turned 43 yesterday. I feel like I'm 63.
Yeah.
With the way my back hurts. The things I have to do before and after I do anything physical, like just serving in a church on Sundays. I go lay on the floor for 3 hours in the afternoon on Sunday just to recover, to start the process of getting back to where I was before I even served.
Yeah.
I mean, forget throwing the ladder, forget dragging a line into a house, picking up a bariatric patient. I mean, those things are a young man's game.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wish that I had for advice when I was in my 20s, pace yourself.
Yeah.
And the job doesn't promote that.
No, it doesn't.
You've got to give it your all. And like the military, you've got to give it your all because it is a young man's game.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, what are you doing to take care of yourself physically, spiritually, and mentally?
Yeah.
And that spiritual part is one thing that I'm seeing lacking, not only in our personal community of firefighters and paramedics, but I'm seeing it in many large departments.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing it nationwide.
Yeah. And part of that is because what we used to call chaplains, fire chaplains, police chaplains, is a servicey of legacy built around people that had grown into a position through their denominations. They represented an ethnic community that looked and sounded a lot like their firefighters. Mm-hmm. That's not the same anymore. We've diversified. And in that diversification, we have a diverse sense of what does a creator that we call, many of us call God, look like. And how do we have a sense of order in that system of spiritual justice? In my personal denomination, the ideal is that I am here to affirm your values. And when I sit with you, I'm going to ask you what God looks like to you, what a sense of justice looks like to you. And then I'm going to help you remind yourself, how did you get to that point where you were able to find a sense of justice even in the pain and the hurt of watching a small child die in front of you? Is one that's in your arms. Because we've all had that, and no one quite gets over a small child dying in their arms. That's not something you just snap out of and go back to the station and pretend everything's great. But we do.
Well, we try.
We try.
Yeah.
We try, and that's because we need to show our brothers and sisters in the firehouse that we're capable of continuing on to the next call.
Yeah.
So 24 hours is a long shift.
Yeah.
And being stable is one of the most important things we can do in order to provide a sense of security with the ones that we fight fires with and possibly lose our lives with.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense outside of our community, because even many police officers I know, they tend to reach out externally for that kind of help quicker than we firefighters and paramedics do. We have an insular community. We bring it to the firehouse table. We talk about it there.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is a really good help. I've had great mentors along the way. I've had fire chiefs and captains that were the right guys to talk to, and they're the ones that said, hey, I got your back. You need help? Let's help you get it. But there's also those that will say, maybe you just need to have a drink and shut up.
Yeah. You can get the best advice or the worst advice.
Oh, Lord. I have to share this story. Years and years ago in the 1980s, when my dad was a firefighter in the inner city, he worked at a station where they actually created a little, back before memes. We have memes on the internet now. And we had refrigerator art.
It's fridge art. That's a time-honored tradition.
This was even deeper than that. This was a pamphlet for the fire station of all the things they're going to fix and solve for your life around the firehouse table.
Oh, I want a copy of that.
Oh, it's amazing. I've got to see if I can find it. It went all the way down to fixing your shortness, fixing your baldness, and it was, fishing advice. It was advice on taxes, and it's like, and none of this is right. It's going to ruin your life if you listen to these guys, and they love you. I had the chance to work with a couple of those firefighters in my time on the job that were still at that station. And it was absolutely true. They are ready to help you fix the right lure. They're ready to help you prep, making your own bullets to go out hunting. I mean, they've got all that down.
Yeah.
But how do you handle your feelings about what happened on shift when you go home with your wife and kids?
Oh,
there's no help there.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, you divorce your wife and then don't talk to your kids. That's how you fix it.
Yes. And what's even better is when they follow in your footsteps and become firefighters, and you still don't talk, because that's there too. Yeah.
Well, dude, it's so ingrained in the culture.
It is.
It's like our profession is so heavy in tradition.
Yes.
Of the things that we do, and the way that we do the things we do, and why we do the things that we do is, well, why do we do that? Well, because we've always done it that way. It's a tradition.
Yeah.
Just like, whenever Christmas time, everybody gets a present for the chief.
Or how about your birthday?
Yeah.
It's your responsibility to bring the cake in.
Oh, yeah. I found that out my very first. I had just got off OJT, and they didn't know what they were going to do with us. Yeah. So I was put at this station, and they're like, just report here every morning, and then they will you'll either stay here or they'll send you somewhere. So I show up, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm all, hey, I'm happy to be here. And they're like, hey, heard it's your birthday. And I'm like, yeah, it's my birthday today. Like, cool. There's a store right over there. Go get cake and ice cream for 14 dudes.
I had the same thing.
So I go and get the cake and ice cream. I come back, set it on the table, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're going to this station now. So I didn't even get to eat any of it.
I've been there. That exact same thing happened to me. They did the same exact thing. They don't care if you're there. Just go get the cake. Yeah. Get the ice cream. We'll worry about the rest later.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got to do it all over again when you get to the station you're supposed to be at, because they're going to call ahead before you get there.
Well, thankfully that didn't happen to me. But
this guy's got a birthday. You better know about that.
Yeah. I was at 3 different stations that day.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we came on about the same time, and we had a little more stability in the 6 months ahead of your class.
Yeah.
Although it wasn't much. It was 6 months of what's our assignment going to be?
Yeah.
Because right now we're floating in an entire district.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what kind of calls you're going to have for the day, if you're even going to have a call for the day.
Yeah.
Depends on who you're working with.
Yep.
There was one day where we didn't have any calls, but we certainly spent the entire day at another fire station filling in. You don't know what you're walking into.
No. And that's something that is really changed since you've left the job. Yeah. The fill-ins, at least moving fire companies, we don't really do that too much anymore. I'm
glad to hear that.
Very rare, but I'll tell you the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
You can't leave that gap.
You can't.
Because if you go over here to fill in at this station, well, somebody still got to come fill in at yours.
Yes.
Because you're still busy too.
Because 90% of our calls are medical related. Moving those ambulances, moving those paramedics around is what is really needed, not necessarily the fire companies.
Yeah.
And it's different because if you're sitting in the back seat of a fire truck, you're probably not going to spend a 24-hour shift on that fire truck.
Not anymore.
Yeah, you're going to swap out. You're going to go from, the ambulance to the fire truck multiple times a day because everybody needs a break and everybody's got to take a bite of the sandwich.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Well, that's how it should work.
That's how it should work. And I'm sure it doesn't work that way everywhere, but the idea that, this is a hard job, there's a lot to deal with, and the people you work with can provide you support, but they can't provide you support entirely.
Yeah.
The idea of somebody to talk to that can't define your job, define your brotherhood or sisterhood in the union is needed. And in the healthcare systems, in the hospital systems, that's what a chaplain is there for. We're not only there for the patients, we're not only there to help them with their crisis and their loss, we're there to help with staff support. Last summer, I spent more time talking to nurses and physicians that were ready to lose their mind on the 14th or 15th rapid response call for the night, because the frustration over violent patients, psychiatric patients, patients that aren't really having an emergency but are absolutely abusing the time in the system. Because even though that happens with us on the streets as firefighters, it happens in the hospitals from room to room.
Yeah.
Even the security officers, they need somebody to vent to. Well, it becomes the chaplain, because you're the one person that they can tell that is sworn to a secrecy, that is giving you confidentiality. You can gripe about anything in the world, and it stays between you and me, and I don't share it with anybody else. That's something we don't have in the fire service right now, and we need.
Absolutely.
There's no way to get crap off your chest except to either go home and vent it on your spouse, or to vent it into a bottle, because that's a great way to get rid of those feelings, but eventually it's going to ruin your life, or another substance. And one of the things that's been determined over the years is, what are we doing to take care of ourselves as far as our emotional health goes? And emotions and spirituality look a lot alike. They're not entirely the same, but they have similarities. Firefighters don't have a lot of hobbies. I mean, little fishing, little hunting, little getting out on the motorcycle. It's all a good thing. But what are you doing that allows you to think clearly and see the world differently? Motorcycle therapy is a good one. It's not one I can do, but I started gardening last summer, and it made a difference.
Yeah. Well,
creating life.
Yeah.
It helps.
You need to do something, and I tell this to people, whenever you're looking at what's my hobby going to be, what am I going to do to decompress, you need to do something that you can do every day. Rain or shine, doesn't matter what it's like outside, doesn't matter where you are, if you have, equipment or don't.
Yeah.
You need to pick something that you can do whenever, wherever.
You do.
And I mean, it's a hard thing to come up with.
It's a hard thing to come up with because it takes a creativity that we don't have the energy for. Sometimes we're too tired when we come home from being up all night to figure out what we're going to do to get this feeling off our chest.
Yeah.
That's where a guy like me comes in. Somebody that has walked the walk, somebody that's been in those shoes, that has seen awful things. But we'll just have a cup of coffee with you and let you say whatever you need to say. A lot of people see the caller and they think, oh, he's probably not the kind of person that cusses. I'll drop F-bombs left and right. It just depends on the crowd I'm in. The reality is this is to remind me of who I'm supposed to be. But what you need to be reminded of is, what's your sense of justice? And sometimes getting it off your chest allows you to go home and have a better day on your day off. And maybe that hobby comes to you a little bit easier when you get some of those frustrations off your chest. But sharing it with your coworkers is not necessarily the best thing you can do for what people's perception of you is in the firehouse, what admin's perception of you is, and your stability and being able to do the job. And certainly at the unit hall, not what their perception is of you as a good brother or sister in the union that's fighting a bigger fight. Well,
not to mention also, it might not be the best thing for that person you're talking to because they've got their own stuff.
100%.
So, I mean, and I've seen it of, the guy that everybody goes to talk to at the station. And then all of a sudden they just melt down.
Because they're taking on everybody else on top of their own. Because
we all have this personality of, well, I'm the helper. I'm going to help everybody. Yeah. Guys on my crew or girls on my crew or whoever on my crew needs my help, I'm going to help them. I'm going to be that person they call, and I'm going to be there. And then after so long of that, stack that on top of the stuff that they're seeing on the job, the stuff that they've got on their personal life.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm not saying don't talk to your crew about stuff. That's not
right.
what I'm saying.
No.
But whenever it starts to trend in that direction, where that's the only person you're confiding in and everybody else is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Let's give that person a break. Let's go talk to a professional.
Yes.
Someone who has training, someone who has knowledge, someone that you can sit down and will listen to you and will probably be able to offer you better advice than,
especially if they're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I know that goes counterculture to what we talk about. What goes on in the firehouse stays in the firehouse.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of anonymity when there's somebody you can trust. And somebody that is professionally trained that can sit with you and listen to what you're saying and offer a perspective that comes from a place where they understand where you've been, they understand the struggle you're in, but at the same time, they're not in that situation and they're not going to spread it across the sisters and brothers on the job. That is a rare thing.
Yeah.
And that is something that I have to offer. That's something that many people have to offer in the psychotherapy world, in the mental health world, in the counseling world. It is needed because in order for you to stay upright and sane, you got to get it off your chest.
Yeah.
And those guys and gals that are the ones that everybody goes to, yes, there makes sense to talk to those people, especially the ones with wisdom. They provide something. But, I know this is an old analogy, it's tried and true, but the idea of onions and layers, we all have different layers.
Yeah.
There comes a sense when you reach a point of personal perspective that is almost too deep for many people you work with to handle. Many, people you're married to handle. That could be too hard on them. They've got their own. I go home and talk to my wife about my day, and she talks about her day. We have our own stresses that come from our own jobs. We have our own experiences that are a little bit different. And if I dump too much of how I feel on my wife or she dumps too much on me, it ends up feeling personal. And that's not healthy for the relationship. Yeah. So the idea of having somebody you can talk to that's outside of that's professionally trained, that has manages their own stuff well and manages it professionally and promotes the idea of you managing it professionally through their counseling is necessary.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody in 2022, soon to be 2023, can get on with life without having somebody professional to talk to, especially if you're in a position of responsibility. You owe it to your subordinates. You owe it to your peers to be at your best when you clock in and you're on duty.
Yeah.
And that takes work. That takes personal work. But at the same time, the reward for taking care of yourself is vast and fulfilling. And the idea of sucking it up and handling it through stoic silence, like we've been taught, our parents' generations taught us this because that's what they were taught.
You know what? I've found that is the absolute best way to go about it is just shut the hell up and do your job.
Be a man.
Suck it up. Suck it up.
Yep.
And I'm going to bring an old one back, I'm sure. Suck it up, buttercup.
Yep.
It's one of my favorite sayings. I think I said it for like the first 20 episodes until both Nelson and Moran were like, if you say that one more time.
They pointed it out.
Yeah.
I
might stab you in the throat.
That hurts. That hurts.
I was like, it's a good saying because it's true.
And you're onto something and they're onto something. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest things that was ever said to me, you'd think 15 years in the firehouse, I'd had a lot of things that were said to me that hurt deeply. And they did. They really did. Nothing hurt deeper than a fellow student of mine in my chaplain internship experience saying, you talk about yourself a little too much. Man, that cut deep. And I realized, oh, you're right. Listen a little more. Shut up a little more.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
I'm going to go back to an old saying because it's great. You have two ears and one mouth. Use them proportionally.
I've never heard that, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we all fall into that trap a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit too much. And especially whenever you're having that conversation with somebody who may come to you to talk, you're only half listening.
Yeah. It's funny to me as somebody who's been trained in the ideals of what chaplaincy is. The first thing that says to me, you need a therapist. You need somebody that will confide, that you can confide in, that will hold those thoughts, that will give you a perspective back. And unfortunately, it's not going to be your friends. It's not going to be your family. It's not going to be your coworkers. That's only going to make them feel like it's too much for them to handle, and they're going to start pulling away from you.
Yeah. Well, and there's a bias there.
Absolutely.
Because they know you. Personal
investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It matters. When you go to somebody that's outside of that, it is freeing. It is actually, it's eye-opening how much they care about you, but yet it's a professional relationship that you need in order to be at your best. And not enough of us partake in this. Now, I know there's healthcare system issues with that. I know that it's not always available at a reasonable price or free.
Yeah, or even just timely.
Timely, yeah. But, let's say you're buying I'm being conservative, a bottle of whiskey a week, $20, $30. If you're drinking cheap whiskey,
yeah.
I like more expensive whiskey than that when I do tend to have a glass. And you could have spent that $100 every 2 weeks to go see somebody that would really help you manage those feelings.
Yeah.
It's what are your priorities? Where are you spending them? And that matters.
It absolutely does.
Yeah. It's self-care. I mean, going to the gym's another thing. Yes, your physical health matters. And I'm not the bastion of physical health over here. I've had my fair share of struggles with that and using food as a coping mechanism like many do in the firehouse. But the reality is if your brain and your soul are not right, your body's never going to be right.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, if your body's not right, your brain and your soul's not going to be right either.
I think of the fire tetrahedron. When they talk about the idea of what it takes to start a fire.
Yeah.
It takes the same thing to manage and maintain your health.
Yeah.
It takes those 3 parts. It always goes back to the number 3, and that gets really esoteric. The idea of 3, and we talk about the idea of the divine being 3, and I can go down that road all day, but
yeah,
it mattres.
Yeah.
And, it's equal parts of things that you can't entirely invest all the way into or not all the way into.
Yeah. And it really is, it takes an investment in all 3.
It does.
Because if, like you can go to therapy every day of the week, or you could go to church every day of the week, or you can go to the gym every day of the week. But if you're only doing one of those things or 2 of those things,
it's not going to be good.
It's not going to work out.
That's absolutely right. It's the hardest thing in our life, I think, to obtain is balance. And it takes a lifetime of work to find balance. It takes a lifetime of work to maintain and manage that balance because it's easy to get out of balance.
Oh, absolutely.
You think of the teeter-totter when you're a kid and you're trying to weigh these things so that you don't rock too much. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But what are you doing to get an objective opinion and get back on track? That's where it's hard. That's a reality check.
Yeah.
And you have to want that.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things that I've experienced with working with people that are in a lot of emotional pain, yes, they're in pain, but they don't really want to change things. And there's comfort in that pain.
Yeah. Well, it's familiar.
Yes.
And, then you go down the road of, well, if I do this to make myself better, what's everybody going to think of me?
Yeah. Especially if you talk openly about it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a challenge.
I've heard from so many people, guests and other people that I've talked to, like, oh yeah, like this person's doing therapy, or you wouldn't believe the amount of people who are doing therapy and all this, and people from places that, you wouldn't think of. And it's like, okay, well, why aren't they talking about it?
Yeah.
Because we all know the numbers.
Yeah.
It's the information is out there of how many firefighters are committing suicide, how many, the divorce rate, the substance abuse rate.
It's huge.
We know all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we have people that have great reputations and have a big presence.
Yeah.
And if you mention therapy around them, they leave the room.
Because it's touching on something in them they're not willing to address. And that is a hard thing to deal with. That's why your coworkers, that's why your close personal friends are probably not the right people to be going to about this. Because it's a minefield. We all want to be accepted by our peers. We all want to be a part of the group, a part of the team.
Yeah.
Well, taking care of yourself may not necessarily benefit the whole team from the perspective that they think you're a safe person to communicate with and work with.
See, and that's why that culture has to change.
It has to change. And part of changing that is normalizing it.
Yep.
Especially those of us that are big, straight, white guys that are not supposed to show any emotions other than hunger and anger. That's got to change.
Yeah.
It's okay to be sad. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have the feelings that you have and to work with that. It's also okay to talk about your health, your mental health, your physical health, and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
And recognize that when people tell you, hey, that's probably too much information, maybe that's not your issue. Maybe the issue is the fact that it's making them uncomfortable because they're not ready to open up about their own.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean,
I get that 100%.
It's a balance.
Yeah. And, people are going to, and I've talked about this before, of whenever people go to get help, or, if it's mandated on them or something.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's not successful.
Correct.
You have to want to change.
Mm-hmm.
You have to want to get healthy. If you want to just boil it down to the base thing, you can use it like a gym analogy of, well, yeah, you can go to the gym every day.
Yeah.
But if all you're doing is going to the gym
and then eating more when you get out of the gym, that's what I did.
You have to actually work out.
You do.
You can't just go there
Yeah.
and walk around for an hour and then expect to, look like Arnold.
And you have to get in a calorie deficit. You have to pack the protein in. There's things you have to do.
Yeah.
It's not just one piece.
Yeah.
Part of the process of circumventing that, of giving yourself a space to get better without necessarily fixing all the problems, people like me. You can bring me your problems. I'll hear your problems. I'll listen. I'll affirm what you believe in. I'll remind you you're not alone. I'll walk with you through this stuff. I won't get tired of you. And I bet that'll probably help. I can't explain it. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it absolutely works. And that is the part of the mystery that the healthcare systems get with their chaplains. They have an autonomy to just go and talk and be in any space they want to be in, and the conversations that come to you. And people need to get it off their chest. Sometimes it doesn't make them 100% better, but it certainly allows them to keep going without losing their ability to function. And that is part of where the fire service could do a better job of providing for their employees that are giving all their lives over and sacrificing their families as well while we're at it in order to make sure that the public is served in a way that most people would never consider serving.
Yeah. Well, and the bonus for the administration or municipality or even the citizens is, you have happier employees, healthier employees.
Absolutely.
Who you may retain for longer. Because let's face it, retention right now in emergency services is probably at an all-time low.
And why aren't more people wanting to do this job? That's a question that's not even being asked.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, everybody's got an excuse or reason of, it's just this generation. And, before it was, people wanted a stable job and a pension and all, which, that's part of it.
Yeah.
It is, because going and working somewhere and staying there for 25 or 27 or 32 years is not appealing to people anymore, because they're just like, well, it's just a job.
Yeah. Especially when you don't feel invested in.
Yeah.
Or the investment into you is more training, better equipment. All those things are great. But what kind of investment into you are they making about making sure that you are upright and healthy and ready to come to work?
Yeah.
And frankly, a new pair of boots is not cutting it for sick leave. I mean,
no.
I've still got pairs of boots in my garage that I don't need. I just don't have the energy to sell them on eBay. What do I do? I mean, I get it. We're trying our best to find a way.
Yeah.
But
well, and it all a lot of it boils back to money.
Money.
Yes. I mean, especially whenever you're looking at a career field or service that really doesn't produce revenue.
Yeah.
We don't produce revenue for the city for the most part.
We only take revenue.
Yeah.
We provide a service that we generally don't charge for.
Yeah.
You might get a bill for an ambulance ride, but that's about it.
Yeah. So, but the fire part of it,
free of charge.
It's free of charge.
It's a public safety matter.
Yeah.
I mean, whole cities used to burn down 120 years ago because there wasn't a fire service in place.
Yeah. But the city doesn't see it that way. Their investment in public safety is not what it should be.
Yeah.
Because all they see is dollar signs. That's it.
Well, and I'll say this too, from somebody that's understood the political perspective of the voting power of firefighters. The idea that you are a credible group of human beings that are sacrificing more than just your time and energy, but your potential life, and you endorse something and say, I, as a firefighter, endorse this candidate. Well, that sounds great. So they give you what they think you want because they need your vote, because they want to win that election.
Yeah.
But in the end, what are you doing to get from them what you need to make sure your firefighters are receiving the health they need? I mean, are we just keeping the cost of healthcare low, or are we really providing an opportunity for firefighters and paramedics to reach their peak optimal health? And I'll leave that question open-ended because we know that it's not necessarily a wrong answer to provide a lower healthcare option, but there's more work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm calling people to step up to the plate. There's more work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because firefighters are dying from suicide. Paramedics are dying from suicide. The burnout rate to quit the job at least provides an opportunity for people to continue living a life, as opposed to sticking around and dying from a substance, dying from ill health, or making the choice to end it all yourself.
Yep.
That's a higher rate than ever now.
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue. And it's not just firefighters and paramedics. Police officers, the military, they're all suffering from the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's an unspoken thing in our culture that we tend to turn away from because it's an ugly thing. But these are the people that are walking into your house and hopefully providing life-saving CPR to your child if suddenly they stop breathing. And it happens.
Yeah.
So the question that I continue to pose to everybody I talk to is, why wouldn't you want your firefighters to have somebody to talk to that's free of charge, free of obligation, and is sworn to competency? Why wouldn't you offer that option? And it might help them see clarity that they need a little more help and they should get it professionally.
Yeah.
But sometimes that hurdle's so big that they choose not to take it because a $20 bottle a week is a lot cheaper than a $100 bill every couple of weeks to see a therapist.
Yeah.
We have work to do, and we're not calling out the other piece of it. And that is, what are you doing to provide your employees a safe space to talk about the issues that are really on their mind? There's work. I can't go back to the fact enough. There's work to do, and it's not being done. And that's what I'm here to do, is to call that out. So I hope they listen. I hope they hear.
Yeah. This will be episode 103.
You have done a great job.
Hopefully.
Yes, you've done a great job. Consistency is not something most firefighters have, and you and your crew definitely have it here. And that is important. It's valuable.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the reason we started this is keep people from going down the same road, but also, we are trying to call attention to the issues and push for a little bit of change.
You're doing chaplain work yourself. I mean, regardless of your view of faith and a creator and a religion, you're doing the work of providing an outlet for somebody to go to. Podcasting is the number one form of received communication since COVID-19 kicked in for millennials and younger. Even many baby boomers and Gen Xers I know are turning to podcasting. It's replaced the radio. It's replaced a lot of things on television. By providing this regular series of informed conversations, it gives people an opportunity to find inspiration to change their lives.
Yeah.
I say that because I'm impressed, and it's a compliment, and I'm grateful to be here a second time.
Well, we're grateful to have you here.
Well, it's you can leave the job, but it doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
I spent the summer with a longtime, well-respected firefighter who was not only just a fire captain, and I say that with all due respect. He was absolutely one of the greatest fire captains, but he was also a big leader in the International Association of Firefighters on the national level. And I got to know him outside of the job. I got to know him as a man of faith that spends every Sunday at his church, connecting with his community, providing meals for people who are less fortunate, and fellowship with people that haven't experienced the pain that we have as firefighters. And on 9/11, I sat with him, and I had the chance to preach at that service and talked about the absolute sacrifice of victim number 0001 at Ground Zero, and that was Fire Chaplain Mike Judge. He was a Franciscan friar, a Catholic priest, and he was the first one to die. And that fire captain, that retired fire captain, and highly exalted IAFF official, was so complimentary. And he reminded me that once you're gone, but you're always family forever because you've seen the other side. And that meant the world to me because he's right. Once you've seen this, you can't unsee it. And it makes me think of that I say old now, it feels like it was a couple of years ago, the documentary about the Detroit Fire Department called Burn.
Yeah.
And their old FAO on the crew, their old driver is saying, I wish my mind could forget the things my eyes have seen.
Yeah.
And that goes through my head daily because so many people in this world want to care, they want to help, and know they haven't seen the things we've seen. But they absolutely will walk the walk with you. They absolutely want to be on your side. And they know what you've done. We don't call ourselves heroes. Frankly, that feels a little disingenuous to say those words.
Yeah.
And there's no way. But these people absolutely see you as a hero because you are willing to give it all up to save a total stranger. Most people would never consider that. And I say that because from the other side, now looking back at what the fire service has done for me and does for all of us, we have so many gifts to offer. And we have to be willing to receive a few gifts in order to be able to be a part of that community. Offering our wisdom and our knowledge is something that they absolutely need. And we can step out of that. The fire culture does not have to be insular. It does not have to be us and us only. Unfortunately, that's gang mentality. And so there's psychologists who've studied gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, and have said, what makes the gangs the gangs? And it's because they believe nobody gets them.
Yeah.
Well, how many times have we heard that in the firehouse? Nobody gets us.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody.
We're so different from everybody else.
Not just, even our wives at home don't get us. Mm-hmm. So screw them too. And that's the worst case scenario. And it absolutely happens.
Yeah.
And that needs to be addressed because that's not true. There are people who want to care. No, they can't do the job that we do, but they absolutely want to be there to support us. Yeah. We have to let them in a little bit.
Yeah.
And that starts with some of us who are on the other side of retirement, who are looking back saying, this was a life-changing experience for me for the better. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And the future brothers and sisters coming through this career need support. That's why I want to make that available for everybody. So,
yeah.
And people reach out. People are talking to me, and I'm grateful for that. It's individual. There's an opportunity to make it bigger. There's an opportunity to make it look more diverse than just me as a big white guy doing what I do. There are Catholic priests, Jewish rabbis. There are Buddhist monks that are willing to have these conversations. There are people that are not necessarily of a religion, but they understand the concept of spiritual force and presence, that are willing to have this conversation. The problem is that we view it as weakness when we let other people in. We have to address that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a part of our culture that for sure needs to be changed. And I mean, it's unfortunately, I don't want to say it's like that's the lowest level, but it is. Because until then, until that culture changes and switches completely, it's going to be 1 by 1 and 2 by 2.
True.
We're still going to be losing people. We're still going to be, people are going to be burning out, leaving the job, committing suicide, all of that stuff because of the culture.
Yes. And I understand the work that's being done to provide peer support. The idea that people who are walking the walk are right there beside you. That's needed. That's absolutely needed.
Yeah.
But the idea of people that are on the outside that can provide support that looks and sounds like a peer but are not necessarily in the same boat is just as healthy as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not being provided. And that's the step that needs to be taken.
Yeah.
And the idea of keeping it so insular needs to be addressed. Why don't we want people outside of our profession to understand what our profession is about?
Yeah.
It's been eye-opening to me in the past couple of years when I talk about the things that I've experienced in the fire service, and total civilians have no concept because they've never heard the stories. We don't tell our stories. One thing about the veteran community they do when they do well is they tell their stories. Recently, and they have a lot of support for telling those stories. And that maneuver is allowing the veterans to get the help that they need from the civilian community to maintain a healthy lifestyle long after their time serving. In order for first responders to have something that looks like that, we're going to have to start telling those stories, and we're going to have to band together in telling of those stories.
Yeah.
And ask the people that we've elected and chosen to be our leaders to be a part of telling those stories, or find new leaders.
Yeah.
Because it's important that we are opening the door for conversations with the public and allowing them to see how this job looks when you're running calls on a street that looks like a war-torn community in a third world, but it's actually an average city in America. Why are we not addressing that?
Yeah.
And it's not just the violence issue. There is absolutely more than violence. There is absolute neglect and total heartbreak when you walk into some of these trailer courts and homes and people have nothing except a phone call to 911. And they're expecting you to fix all their problems.
Yeah.
How do you forget about that when you clock out at 7 a.m. if you're not working overtime?
Yeah. Oh, you get to clock out at 7 a.m.? Yeah, that don't happen.
No. So that needs to be talked about, and those are some of the things that are on my mind from the outside looking in after a couple years away. But the opportunity to give you a place as somebody on the front lines to talk with somebody who's been on the front lines, who has tried to empathetically walk with that, not only as a firefighter on the front lines, but as a union official, understanding the bigger picture of the issue. That's what I'm here for, and I will continue to be here for those in our regional community, regardless of department. You need somebody to talk to, and my denominational church is absolutely giving me the ability to do that in the name of the church, but also, really more importantly, in the name of love, because every human being deserves an opportunity to be heard and loved. And we don't talk about that L word very often in the firehouse unless we're using it as a joke.
Yeah, no, not so much. I love your cooking.
Yes. Well, that's a huge compliment, and that's a hard one to get.
Yeah.
Most of the time they insult your cooking when they love it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Throw a plate in the trash. That's,
oh, my goodness. And the bad part is they go back for seconds with a brand new plate.
Oh, yeah. So there was something whenever we were talking about you coming back on.
Yeah.
You were talking about how grief looks different.
Yeah.
So let's get into that.
Absolutely. We have experienced a rash of tragedies in the department that we've both worked for. Tragedies that are outside of the service of being firefighters. Things that shouldn't have happened that happen in the community because violence happens every day. And one of the peak moments of awareness in that is, what does grief look like specifically in firefighters? Because it doesn't look the same. We have the firehouse culture that influences us. We have a certain acceptable way to behave when we're on the clock, even when we're off the clock, when we're around our peers. And we don't talk about what grief looks like, because that's a hard thing to understand. And in my training in seminary and chaplain school, looking for grief is something that we do. And I'm able to see it myself. I'm able to see it in others that I know that come from this job and are on the job now. And back to the idea of the peak alpha male and acceptable behaviors, hunger and anger being the only expressions of emotion that we're allowed to have. A lot of the times our grief as firefighters looks like anger. It looks like a shortness of tolerance for those around us that are not performing well or to the optimal capabilities they have as firefighters.
Your perception of how they should be performing.
Your perception, yeah. And it comes out as anger, because anger is an acceptable behavior in the culture of the fire service, especially when things are not going well, when people are not fighting fire hard enough, they're not caring for the patient hard enough, and they're treating people that they work with like you are a rotten soul because you were not giving it your 110%.
Yeah.
Let alone all the little things that might have come along to make their day so hard for them to just get there on time and clock in and catch the rig on time. And that's an issue, because unfortunately the tragedies like what we've experienced in recent months are not going to stop. This is just the latest.
Yeah.
There's always a couple every year. That means that there's a firehouse every year in this area that is affected by deep grief. And what are we doing to address that? You know, I know that there's a few administrative officials and union officials that go in with a counselor or two and say, let's have a after-action review. Let's talk about a critical incident stress debriefing. And that sounds great and looks great on paper. But we all know pretty well that firefighters and paramedics don't express their feelings just because they're told, hey, now's your time to express your feelings.
Yeah.
They tend to do it later, and they tend to do it long after what they think is the time to process, and it's a couple months later, and it starts to look like out-of-control alcoholism, starts to look like recent disagreement with their spouse to the point of divorce. It starts to look like, violence in the home. I mean, we don't talk about that at all. Yeah. The amount of spousal abuse that happens in the service.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's substance abuse related, but sometimes that's emotionally related due to PTSD issues that are unmitigated. And it's absolutely swept under the rug. And I would like to say not intentionally. For the sake of the people that may hear this, that come from the world of trying to do good in those bureaucracies, I don't believe anybody's trying to do anything intentionally harmful. I just believe that they're not aware of it, and they're not necessarily willing to listen to an outside perspective that can see it clearer because they've stepped away from it for a while.
Yeah.
And my hope is that they're willing to listen, because we may notice that. And I know that at other firehouses over the past decade or so, where tragedies have happened, we've seen severe pain look like the forms of suicide attempts, look like the forms of substance abuse, look like the forms of overdoses, and look like the forms of absolutely quitting on their entire lives. And we're not willing to recognize that there's a pattern here. Hopefully that's unintentional.
I mean, you would hope so.
And that's the thing.
Or they just don't know what to do.
Well, and I say hopefully because deep down, there's no community on this planet I love more than firefighters. People that are willing to give their lives for total strangers, because we all have a calling, and that calling is to serve greater humanity so they don't suffer in pain. That is something we don't say often enough, and we don't recognize often enough. And it needs to be noticed, because you didn't get into this business because you were just looking for a great job, but looking to turn the other way on people that are hurting. You won't last long. You won't last at the fire academy if you're just here for a paycheck. You've got to want to do more. And I truly believe everyone I've ever experienced working with, and everyone that I know that wears the IAFF logo and a shirt from their department with pride, is willing to go above and beyond what it takes to make sure that people around them don't die. And they care, but sometimes we're our own harshest critics, and we put more stress on our fellow sisters and brothers to perform at a level that is beyond human. It's truly superhuman.
Yeah.
And we need to address the fact that we are not giving them a fair shake. We're still humans.
Yeah.
And it's still going to be hard, and it's still going to hurt, and we're going to have bad days, and we're going to have calls we can't get out of our head the rest of our lives, and certain dates on the calendar are going to remind us of those. You know, while we're recording this, we're in the Advent season technically, but it's really the holidays. Christmas is around the corner in a couple weeks, and this is not an easy time for a lot of people.
No.
This reminds them of people and loved ones and loved things that have died, and tragedies they've witnessed. Yeah. I can remember calls that I've run on Christmas Day where children have died that I can't get out of my head, and I don't forget those on Christmas morning.
Yeah,
and
it's just about guaranteed.
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving,
yes,
Christmas,
yes,
you're going to do CPR,
and it dampens the ability to experience real joy.
Yeah,
and part of that needs to be understood, and that's where my desire and where I think my Creator is calling me to be is in a space that understands this is going to really hurt for others, and they need somebody to be there with them, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be there with them, and I have information to share on that so people can contact me and reach me. And there are communities of people out here that absolutely care in confidentiality and in sensitivity to your ability to continue to perform your job and not hurt your reputation, but give you a space to be yourself and let it out and not judge you for it.
Yeah.
And I say that because I had to go through it myself. You can't leave this job and not experience what it's like to become a civilian again. I know we're not military, but it sure looks and feels and acts like military.
Yeah.
And when you get to the other side of this in retirement, you will suddenly feel like there's nothing that replaces the firehouse dinner table.
Well,
and nothing really does.
No, nothing does. It's a wholly unique experience, I think. And I'll say that with a caveat.
Yeah.
If you're on vacation with a bunch of firemen and cops, then you can recreate that.
Oh, I'm sure that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just in everyday life, there's nothing that recreates that.
No.
I mean, the conversations and the amount of topics that you can go from in 10 minutes. you can be over here.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes later, you're over here, which is not anywhere close to talking about this thing.
Yes.
And it's funny. I experienced that the other day at the station. We were sitting around having coffee in the morning. Everybody's getting ready for their shift or to go home.
Yeah.
And a couple of the guys started in about something. And 10 minutes later, we had moved from the kitchen table to the island in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And there's 4 of us sitting there. And then one of the captains walks in and he's like, wait a minute, 5 minutes ago you guys were talking about this. Now you're talking, how did you get there?
ADD is a pain in the ass. And you have to have a little bit of it to do the job and enjoy the lights and sirens. But that is where I have this unique expression of understanding spirituality and faith. Because I would argue with anyone of any religious background or theological training that the firehouse table is one of the most sacred spaces you could ever be in. As much as it can hurt, it can also absolutely change your life for the better.
Yeah.
Having space where we have great equalizers, whether it's that cook shack and you're around the table and you're eating together, or a cup of coffee and the newspapers in the morning. I don't even know if anybody does newspapers anymore. They used to.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
That was a huge thing.
I think it's cell phones now.
It's pretty much. Yeah. It used to be, did you go through the whole crossword puzzle thing?
Oh, yeah. It was the crossword puzzle was a fight every day.
And then you always had that one guy who would just mess with everybody and fill it out in pen.
Yes.
But only like half of it.
And
they would all be wrong.
Unintentionally to ruin it. Yes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a thing. But there is something about that space where we all come together that can't be replicated. And maybe I challenge you and anybody else to think, is that God talking to us? Now, God doesn't necessarily make us feel good, but God reminds us of what's universally true.
Yeah.
And what's universally true in the firehouse is that we're a brotherhood, a sisterhood. We care about each other on a level that's deeper than the average person would, the average stranger. Even if you've never worked together more than a couple hours on a shift, you have to be willing to put your life on the line to save their lives, and they have to be willing to do the same. And that is where God comes in, because you can't just do that if you don't believe in something bigger than yourself. So regardless of people's struggle with a religion, screw that. Throw that out. Religion doesn't matter here. What matters is that there's something that has created us that wants us to care for each other and ourselves, and we have to do that. And we're called to do that as firefighters. We take an oath to do that. So how about we do a little more of that within the dining room table, within the firehouse, and be a little bit gentler on each other. I've worked in some great firehouses where people absolutely did that. There was a good company officer that was a good mediator, kept tensions low, and treated people with fairness and equity, and brought people around the table and their voice mattered and counted. And I've worked with others that probably shouldn't have necessarily been company officers, and that wasn't necessarily a prerequisite for them to become a promoted officer.
Yeah.
And
let's not I'll get on the soapbox. Let's not do that.
I get it. Well, no, I get it. And in a bureaucracy, there's always going to be people that get through the system that probably shouldn't have.
Oh, absolutely.
But on the converse side of that, ask yourself the question, what are you here to learn?
Yeah.
I mean, there's something important to learn from that, and there's an experience that you're gaining that you will remember not to do yourself and replicate yourself. Mm-hmm. And that takes work. But that's where the need to promote mindfulness comes in here, and to give that space for people on a front line doing a job that's beyond stressful to recognize grief, to allow others to help them recognize that they have some grief. And maybe that grief is not necessarily just related to the tragedy they've experienced in the firehouse. Maybe it's related to some things they've experienced in their personal life that's now bleeding over into the career. Because none of us come into this job. Yeah.
Hold on. You mean there can be stuff that you go through on your personal life too, on top of the fire stuff?
Oh man. Nobody makes it. If you're lucky, if you're really lucky and you get on this job at like 18, 19, 20 years old, that wasn't me. I was more like 23, 24. You're probably going to have some life experiences that have pain involved. And if you're
shocking.
And if you're the child of a firefighter or another first responder, you're coming in with all their stuff too. I mean, I think we all know that joke. The firefighter's kid is probably the most screwed up kid you meet in the firehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because they're carrying all the weight and trauma of their parents' struggles.
Yeah.
Because their parent was not given a generational experience that promoted mental and spiritual health. They were just told to suck it up, buttercup.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from my personal experience, they always fall in one of two categories. They're either jam up, hard workers, they're going to be great.
Yeah.
Or they are the laziest, most entitled pieces of crap that I've ever worked with.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. Yeah. And that both of those are a trauma response. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Because people pleasing as a trauma response is absolutely prevalent in the fire service.
Oh yeah.
You're living in a group home for 24 hours. You're in a prison for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And I say that because a long retired firefighter once walked into my downtown firehouse and needed to use the phone, and we didn't know where he came from. And we asked him, we said, "Where'd you come from?" He goes, "Oh, I just got out of the county jail. I need to make a phone call so I can get a ride." And we're like, "Okay, well, how was jail?" And he goes, "Well, it was just like the firehouse, except you never catch the rig." It shocked all of us. It's like, oh, you're right. We're all in prison. 24-hour sentence every third day.
Think of the colors that the city uses to paint the fire stations.
The same colors they paint the jails.
It's the same color.
It's the cheapest paint on the block.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's institutionalization. Mm-hmm. That's how it affects us.
Yep. And
it's funny that I think some of the most beloved movies in the firehouse are usually the ones about people in prison. Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, I think some of these movies, it's about being locked in against your will with people that you have to make the best of.
Yep.
Well, that's not necessarily far away from God. God kind of works through people you don't necessarily like and tells you some true things about yourself and some true things about reality you need to hear. And that's a community that you're called to be in, whether you want to be there or not.
Yeah.
We don't entirely have control over ourselves like we think we do.
Yeah. Well, and remember that old Jim, growth is often painful.
Oh, it hurts. Very much hurts.
Yeah.
Yes. Wisdom is one of the most dangerous things you could ever pray for. I made that mistake as a child. And it's all hurt every step of the way, and that's what it does. But if you want to know things, you're going to see a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And they say ignorance is bliss, and it absolutely is. But nobody in the fire service is ignorant. They've seen awfulness. They've seen pain and hurt. And they experience grief, but sometimes they're not allowed to call it grief. Or they're not allowed to say, hey, this is grief. And grief is a tool like anything else. You can let it destroy you if you don't manage and maintain it, or it can be a gift to open your eyes to things that people are experiencing around you that can allow them not to feel alone. Because really, one of the questions, and I know this sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but it's connected. One of the biggest things I get asked as a test when they see the collar and they see what I do as a deacon in the church is, oh, well, what's your idea of sin? Or what do you think about gay people? And those are the two questions I get the most right now in 2022. And the first answer when it comes to anybody of an LGBT expression is that you are fully loved by God and you are fully loved by me. And there is no such thing as sin, regardless of how you are born and made in this life. And you deserve to be loved because you're made in the likeness and image of our Creator. All of us are. The other thing is what happens with that pain and that suffering. And pain and suffering is part of the biological human experience. We're all going to die. Everything we know is going to die. This is not our souls. This is our body. We have to understand that we're here to understand something more about ourselves. We're here to understand something more about the way the world works. And we as firefighters and paramedics have an opportunity to see a world that most people don't see, it's a gift. But it's a gift that can hurt you. Yeah. So it takes work to maintain and manage yourself and keep yourself at your best. You know, they in some classes I've taken about this, they talk about the idea of the caveman and fire. When the caveman first discovered fire, the idea of fire being dangerous was not on the caveman's mind because it was about creating light and a source of heat and life and being able to cook food. But out of control, it can kill you. So anything that we have that looks like fire, and in the fire service, that would be knowledge, can kill us. So we have to maintain and manage that. Build a team of people around you that care about you, that are here to make sure you're at your best. That takes work. Yeah. And I can't encourage people that listen to this podcast enough to take those steps to find an external confidant to talk to. It needs to be done. You need somebody that can help you see perspective, that is invested in you, but not necessarily so emotionally invested that they won't tell you the truth. Yeah. The truth is going to hurt when they say, hey, you need help.
Yeah.
And you need to hear it.
Yeah.
Not getting help is more dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and everybody thinks that they're doing you a favor by sugarcoating stuff.
Well, sure.
And
we're all people pleasers in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't want to hurt anyone.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing is, I think you have to reframe it because you're not, hurting them, you know?
Yeah.
Let's look at it as like a broken leg, right? If the doctor doesn't want to cause you pain, well, they can just give you some pain meds and then just keep you like that.
And let it heal without fixing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're going to walk around with an S where you should have an L, you know?
They could have reset it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to fix you, it's going to take some pain.
Yeah. You think of joint dislocations, they have to put the joint back in place.
Yeah.
And that's going to intentionally cause pain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference between loving and liking. And love is something, if we can define love, especially in a fraternal sense among sisters and brothers in the firehouse, we all love each other. Nobody wants to see anyone die. We all want everybody to go home safe.
Yeah.
We think of the pain that we've all felt when somebody we know has died unexpectedly or tragically because of the job or outside of the job, and their life was cut short. Nobody wants that. Well, love is what calls us to not want that. It's what calls us to want to see them go home happy and healthy to their families. And to like someone is completely different. We should love everyone that we experience time with, because they need to go home. Liking somebody is a little bit different. That's a little more superficial. And that can have unintentional consequences when we like someone. Because liking someone can mean that we don't want them to have a bad feeling because we might say something hurtful, yet true, and they need to hear.
Yeah.
Well, if we loved them, we'd want them to get better, and we might bite the bullet and say that thing and rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
That's going to hurt. And you may experience some pain because they backlash on you. Yeah. But if you love them, you know that you're giving them the reality check they need to actually take the steps to take care of themselves. And down the road, it's worthwhile. It's almost always worthwhile.
I was watching a documentary the other day called The Call We Carry. It's on YouTube. It's from Tacoma Fire Department.
I have to check that out. Thank you for telling me about that.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome. I was going to mention that after the show.
Yeah,
but, since you brought it up.
Yes, I'm on board.
Anyway, one of the interviews was the department therapist. And she's like, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it boils down to, I would rather have them alive and mad at me.
Yes.
Than not mad at me and dead.
Absolutely.
She goes, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
Because eventually they're not going to be mad at me anymore.
Yeah.
But if they're dead, they're always going to be dead.
And sometimes our time together in a space of where we like each other is not meant to be around forever.
Yeah.
But they're still living and they're happy and they're healthy and they're experiencing new growth in other areas of their life. Yeah. Well, wouldn't we want that for someone as opposed to being dead? Yeah. When they shouldn't have died?
Yeah. The ability to have those hard conversations.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that whole growth is pain.
Yes.
You know, you're sore after you go to the gym. That's because your muscles are growing, because you worked them out.
You actually physically tore the muscle tissue,
Yeah.
which now has to grow and heal, and the scar tissue is what creates an increase in muscle mass. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your spiritual. I got
good.
all excited.
You got there. I got it.
It's the same thing with your spiritual and emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to go through some pain.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're talking about you're going to go and you're going to see a therapist and you're going to do EMDR, you're going to do talk therapy, and you're going to dredge up all of those old calls.
Oh, it sucks.
It sucks. It's going to be hard.
It hurts because you're living it all over again.
Exactly. But when you come out the other side of it, whenever you're able to process that stuff and move those emotions from those memories.
With
and
some professional guidance
Yeah.
that helps you understand what you're feeling. Yeah. Suddenly you wake up a couple days later and it's a great day.
Yeah.
I mean, I've personally experienced that. Thank God. Thank God for that. It gives you a whole new understanding of what we're here to do and what we're meant to do. The same can be said in a religious setting, in the idea of spirituality. It's hard to look at a church doors and think I belong in there, especially if you're a firefighter. Because you know what we deal with on the 24-hour shift. It's not just the calls. It's the culture within the department, within the station. And a lot of that is good and okay because it's about getting through the shift. Once again, think of it like this. We're in a 24-hour prison. Every 3 days we got to go back.
Yeah.
You're going to experience life that has a different set of morals and values than the life of people that go home from work after a 9-to-5 day, and they see their children and their family, and they tuck them in every night by 9 p.m., watch the evening news, and go to bed. We don't live that. We live a different life, a life where you're up all night in a part of the city that no one wants to be in, trying to keep the front of a building from falling off because it's burning to the ground and collapsing on the sidewalk, which could potentially affect the neighbors around them. You are dealing with people who have absolute poverty, and you're the closest thing they have to a superhero. So when you get away from that and you have time to yourself, are you able to understand what is good and what's not? And that takes work, and it takes outside perspective, because the only way that the fire service is going to continue to survive in this country on the pace that it is in this post 9/11 world is to increase the amount of support from organizations outside of the fire service, just like the veterans have. And really, I would argue that the space that the fire service, the police service, and any other emergency medical service is in 20 years post 9/11 is in a space that the United States military was in 20 years post World War I. When the need for a Veterans Affairs Association was created, when the need to come together and create more support and structure for these people who had served and given their all was needed. We don't have anything like that. When you're retired, you're just expected to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's more than that.
You know, and it does, we do follow along with what the military does.
Absolutely.
You know,
a lot of our members are from the militaries.
Yeah.
They know.
And so we get, carry over medical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you came on the job, did you have a tourniquet?
They just outlawed it when I first came on, and then they brought it back a couple years later.
Yeah.
Yes, it was this.
It was because of...
It was the Gulf War.
Yeah.
The Gulf War is when they reintroduced it and said, no, this actually is necessary to save a limb. Yeah.
And, I mean, that's just one thing, but then you look at these, the research that's gone into with veterans for their TBI.
Yeah.
And then also their mental health stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to carry over.
Yes.
We're starting to kind of see that on the fire side and on the police side and the EMS side, but we're 20 years back.
Absolutely.
We're at least 20 years back.
It takes a generation of people to realize we've created a problem by not addressing the problem.
Yeah.
I think we're at that precipice. It's time to start realizing that it takes more. And I'm not saying that our booster organizations that do everything they can to make sure that you have a great living wage, you have great benefits, and that is maintained and managed aren't doing that work, but more needs to be done. More needs to be done on a federal level. More needs to be done on a state level. Civic organizations and cities need to recognize that it's not just the same job but a different department than public works or the water department or aviation. There's more to this. You're asking people to sacrifice their potential. You're definitely asking people to sacrifice their health in their future, but not just their health, but their ability to live a quality life after they've gotten done serving.
Yeah.
25 years on a fire service is like the equivalent of, if I remember right, 7 tours of active combat duty. That is something that most veterans, if they experienced that, would have more support than we could even name in order to make sure that they can manage and maintain a healthy lifestyle mentally and physically. We don't have any of that. As a matter of fact, you're expected to figure out your own healthcare situation in retirement.
Yeah.
And good luck with that, with all the pre-existing conditions you've developed from the career and the job itself.
Yeah.
Just the lack of sleep alone creates sleeping disorders, which can create cardiac issues. Mm-hmm. And all those things pop up. Which firefighter on this job doesn't have insomnia or a blood pressure issue? And those are all related to sleep disorders.
Yeah. And
it's there.
We have joked before on this podcast about how whenever you graduate the academy, you should just be issued a sleep machine.
Seriously, and when I first came on, nobody had sleep machines. And the one guy in the firehouse that did, everybody made fun of because he had one.
Yep.
And he was the only one doing his best to try and take care of himself.
Yep.
And everybody has to have one at this point.
Yeah.
I love mine. It keeps me awake and alive during the day. So yeah. But the time is now to step up to the plate for our leadership and provide safe, confidential space for their employees to be heard and to seek the next levels of help. And it doesn't have to be as hard of a jump as I need a therapist. Yes, maybe you do need a therapist, but first you just need a friend to talk to that's not going to talk crap behind your back.
Yeah.
That's where somebody like me comes in.
Yeah.
And there are many people like me out here that are ready to do that work.
Yeah.
So grief looks funny. And sometimes grief is not something we can see in ourselves. But there are moments when the life of the firehouse changes. Somebody suddenly dies. Somebody suddenly leaves and quits. Somebody suddenly gets fired. And that's not addressed. We're expected to just be okay.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be another butt in that seat the very next shift.
There has to be.
Yeah.
It's shocking when you hear stories of some of the old timers who talk about those that died in explosions and fires generations ago. Their paycheck stopped the moment they died.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even get paid to the end of their shift, even if there was only an hour left in the shift. They're no longer employed here. And that creates a trauma among the people that are still there that's never addressed, that's never talked about, and is swept under the rug because we're just expected to keep doing our job if we love this job enough.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in the idea of having a hierarchy of needs, and there is a psychological study about the hierarchy of needs of human beings in order to make sure there's food and shelter and warmth so they can live, they're going to choose that every time over a job.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be loyal to your job when you have threatened their ability to make sure the house can be there, to make sure that the food and the heat can be there. So when it starts to look like you're threatening their hierarchy of needs by cutting off their paycheck an hour before their shift is over because they died, you are now instilling in all the others that are left living and left expected to work, nobody has my back. Yep. Nobody cares. And now it's only us that get us. And the gang mentality starts to kick in. Yep. If you want to reverse that, if you want to actually stop that, you have to allow your firefighters and medics to start talking to people that have safe, confidential, and professional training that give them space to be themselves.
Not only allow, but encourage and put forth the opportunities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is where the need is. The opportunities are not being put forth.
Yeah.
I'm personally putting forth those efforts, and I'm personally using my social media to reach people in those spaces.
Speaking of that, you need to send me your social media stuff
I
so
will.
I can put it on the...
Absolutely.
And your contact info so I can put that all in the video description.
Yes.
So people don't have to pause and rewind,
We will do that. Yes, I've got a card for you when I'm done here.
All right.
Yep, we've got that. And I'm centrally located, and I travel, and you matter. And if you're listening or watching this, you matter. And I am there for you. There's a whole group of human beings out here that call themselves a church that are there for you. And they're not here to make you feel like you have to believe what they believe in order to be loved and accepted and heard. That's what matters first. Live by example. firefighters talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
Uphold a standard.
there are ways to believe in God that do the same thing, and that is something that passed my bullshit test as a deacon in the church when I first got involved. Because if they really wanted something disingenuous from me, I would have heard about it by now. Instead, they heard about all my trouble and pain and struggle with trauma and PTSD, and they still loved me anyways. They'll love you too. It just takes work to get there. So,
Yep.
absolutely.
Dude, thanks for coming on.
I'm always grateful to be here. I love what you do.
Well,
So
we're always excited to have you. It's always a good one. So
we'll keep talking.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, do you want to do closing thoughts? Because what you said was pretty good.
Let's call that a closing thought.
Okay.
I think that's good. The work that you do, you and your crew do here, this is my closing thought. It's needed. Keep going with it. I appreciate it. And I'll do everything I can to support it and boost it from my end of things. But just know that there's a greater community of first responders and professionals out here that may not serve on the front lines anymore, but have been through it with you and will walk through it with you, even though they're not there anymore. And they now have training in other areas of expertise that will make sure that you can stay upright and you can stay in a lifestyle that is healthy for you and the future of your career. So.
All right. Well, we're going to close this like we do every episode. We talked about resources.
Yes.
Here's one.
Absolutely.
So we're going to put all of his information in the show notes, in the description. So reach out. If you are struggling, reach out. That is the first step.
Please do.
If you know somebody that's struggling, talk to them, be invested in them. Let them know what the resources are around you. Just let them know that you care. Sometimes that's all that's needed.
Absolutely.
So thanks for stopping by. And, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.